But what an honor to talk to Ed Martin. He's the president of the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, and he is the new chief of staff at the incredibly important Office of Management and Budget. Mr. Martin, how are you, sir?
Hey, Mike, I'm great. I'm a huge fan of your program and everything Breitbart does. So it's great to be on with you. It's been a while, and I'm really grateful. Appreciate very much your listeners and your readers. And yeah, it's great to be together.
That's great. I'm so glad we're on the same team here. So first of all, it's pretty amazing. Like, I don't know any election ever where I or any host ever was like, hey, let's talk to the new chief of staff at the Office of Management and Budget.
Yeah.
Can't wait to hear what that guy's up to.
Yeah.
But now you're like one of the most important people in the entire country. And not an exaggeration. What is the Office of Management and Budget?
Well, I don't know about any of that characterization, but I agree with you. It's the most important, one of the most important offices. You know, as America grew in scope, the government, it grew so darn big, so much money. It became a lot different than, the day before they had a federal income tax, over 100 years ago. It just became massive. One of the key places is called the Office of Management and Budget, because you got to run all these departments. They have to get the money that runs them. They have to get the personnel that runs them. They have to have the policies. So when you talk about the sort of back office, the boiler room of the President of the United States, of his administration, it's OMB. And, we'll work on the budget, the president's budget, and he spends a ton of time on that. But we also work on how it's being played out and how the money's being spent and who's doing what. And when there's poor choices, you can pull them back and all kinds of things. And so the director, my boss, is named Russ Vought. He had the job for the last 2 years of the Trump administration's first term. He's a really sharp guy. He's a really smart guy. He's really, you talk about one of the important people in the country. He's one of the really key people. He sees the entire playing field of what's happening. He's a great conservative. So, all that would be big. And I tell you, I think it's the most important place to work in the government. And then Elon and Vivek decided to do this DOGE thing, and the president signed off on it. And all of their work is working with OMB. I mean, those guys quickly assessed, if you want to change government, you can't just talk about it outside. You got to figure it out. And you can't really plan on passing legislation. It takes a long time. You might do some, but in the interim, you can all of the deregulation goes through OMB. It has to be managed through a division of OMB. So Vivek and Elon have been hand in glove with Russ Vought. I'm meeting later today with one of Elon's senior guys, and the DOGE stuff is. I would have told you 6 months ago, the DOGE is a pipe dream. Everybody thinks they're going to reform government, like they all say that, and then they get in and government wins. Now I'd say the odds are on the DOGE boys, because they know how to use the tools, and Elon's going to use the PR machine that he is, and we're going to use the nuts and bolts and change things. So it's a pretty exciting time.
So I think help me understand this relationship. I think this is it. So correct me where I'm wrong. Where DOGE doesn't actually have the ability to do anything technically. I mean, they have the platform and all these other things, and they collect what needs to be done, whatever. But then they need a mechanism to do the stuff. And the mechanisms are either Congress, maybe some stuff via executive order, but really through you.
Yeah.
Through the Office of Management and Budget.
That's right. That's right. Look, I mean, I think actually, again, Elon and Vivek both are smart dudes, and they could have asked to be a head of a department. And in fact, I actually argued to Bobby Kennedy that he should be the czar of Make America Healthy, because running a department is a total hassle. I mean, you get sued every other day. You get tied up by the bureaucrats. And Elon and Vivek said, wait a second, we want to take a vision, like a look at the whole of the playing field. And when they did that, if Elon finds a great idea, if they find some great things, they're going to say, hey, let's go ahead and go see the Department of Commerce secretary and see if he wants to embrace this. And that's good. And they'll do all that. I'm not limiting only what they're doing, but they quickly realize if you come up with 100 regulations that are really stupid, that are dragging a certain business sector or certain set of American, values are being slowed, you can change that through OMB and through the system of regulations and how you change regulations. So, and then also, look, here's the oldest wives' tale in the history of the world. You want to get a man's attention, grab him by the wallet. right? Look, we control the money going out of the government, out of the department, out of our treasury into the department. So if you want to get people's attention at USAID, for example, that spends hundreds of millions of dollars, it looks like a CIA cutout to me, and they're doing stuff that makes no sense against America. OMB can say the money's on hold until we figure out if you're actually doing what this president wants, and that's what we intend to do. And the DOGE boys immediately saw that, and they were like, okay, we get it. Let's work together.
Oh, it's amazing. All right, we're talking to Ed Martin. He's the new chief of staff at the Office of Management and Budget. So Russ Vogt was on Tucker's podcast the other day. I encourage everyone to watch it. You're the chief of staff. So what is your job in Office of Management and Budget?
Well, here's a lesson for all the young people or anyone. I was chief of staff once to the governor of Missouri, and I called a friend of mine. He became a friend who was a chief of staff to another governor. He said, "Here, let me tell you how this works, Ed. The principal says yes, and the chief of staff says no. The principal appoints, and the chief of staff disappoints." I mean, 95% of the decisions in any big department are made not by the director, because he's got to work on the 5% that they're the hardest. It's like when you take to the president of the United States, you don't take him 100% of the decisions. You take him the 5% that are the hardest. And so most of the day-to-day, most of the, kind of functioning of what we've got to do is run by a team. Maybe we've got a deputy director named Congressman Dan Bishop, who is just a total, stud, and he knows the system. He'll be also running things with Russ. So I'm not overstating it, but in general, we've got about 600 employees at OMB, but our reach is into every single aspect of government. So you got a lot of things to pay attention to, and then the president has been clear. For people that think it's like, oh, I'm going to go to work, I got great ideas. I don't have any great ideas. I have Donald Trump's ideas, and he was clear. We're gonna close the border. We're gonna deport all these bad dudes, and we're gonna get them out. Then we're gonna drill, baby, drill, and turn the economy around. Right? Then we're gonna deregulate the hell out of this government that's swamping us, and we're gonna go right down his list of priorities. The de-weaponization. We can say to the FBI and others, hey, you're using our dollars in your budget, and we don't know why it's being used like this. Answer why. And I'm telling you, Kash Patel and other people are going to take on the challenges on the sort of front end, but on the back end, we're going to jam their wallet until we get priorities of the president. This isn't like priorities of the government. The government is nothing. The president, his priorities, and we're gonna do that. So, and this president's awesome. I mean, he's I just was on the phone before I jumped on with you guys with a guy. We're trying to promote America. President Trump wants to make the world come to America and see how great we are. Don't be afraid of our statues. Don't be afraid of our history. Celebrate the hell out of it. And we're going to do that starting in May of next year for about 15 months, because it's the 250th anniversary of America. And so this is the kind of stuff that we're going to do that's going to make, I think, the American people not just feel better, but live together better.
It's great. We're talking to Ed Martin. He is the president of the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles and will very soon be the new chief of staff at the Office of Management and Budget. Are you overwhelmed at all? And I guess the question of that is, where do you start with all of this? There's so much to do. What's your priorities?
Yeah, again, what I learned earlier in my career is if you the old joke, you can't eat an elephant in one bite, right? You got to just kind of. And so, yes, I'm overwhelmed because the federal government's been overwhelmed, and yes, I'm overwhelmed because the federal bureaucracy wants us to be overwhelmed. But that's again what this president teaches. All right, he teaches you just keep going. And I tell people one of the things, the psychology of succeeding is not to wait around to hit a grand slam in the bottom of the ninth, but to hit a single today, right? Hit a single with you, right? Be able to spend time with you and talk and have your listeners go, oh, I see what they're trying to do. That's a single, maybe a double, right? Maybe some people get motivated. Mm-hmm. And so, it is overwhelming. But on the other hand, there's an urgency, which makes it easier to say, I'm going to start swinging on day one, because, we've got 4 years, but really in many ways you think in chunks, like 2-year chunks, because of the congressional cycle. And so, you just got to get after it hard. And I think, this election was so different than anything we've had in my lifetime. It really was a kind of mandate in the face of the craziest headwinds Donald Trump won resoundingly. And therefore you say, okay, fear not, be not afraid and charge on. And so, yeah, it's overwhelming. I mean, I'm not even in the job yet. Talk to me in February. I'll probably be, strung out with too little sleep, but I'm energized too. And the other thing about a funny job, right? You take your job and you're working so hard. You say, I'm going to do this and to keep succeeding. This job, it's on a timeline, right? You got 4 years. So you sort of say to yourself, head down, let's go. And then one more thing, there is Breitbart himself, Andrew, and a lot of your folks have always inspired me. My boss, Phyllis Schlafly, knew Andrew. Steve Bannon was very good to her and their friends. They were friends. And it's a movement. What Andrew was doing, what the Tea Party did, it's a movement, and it's crystallizing in some ways, but it's very important for us to keep succeeding in both doing the good things, right, and also articulating what this is about. And Andrew was above all a communicator, right? He was his revolution was in saying, stop listening to other people tell you what your message is, and that's something that we're aware of in this time.
Okay, we were talking about something earlier, and it came down to the history of this thing. Came down to lobbying, and it was so crazy that these companies were able to lobby against the interest of the American people, obviously in their own interest. And I'm just worried that a lot of these amazing things that we want to do are going to get railroaded by lobbyists. What do you think about that? What do you make of that?
Well, I think that is always a concern, right? I mean, in this sense, again, when the government's gotten so big and has so much money and power to dispense, it gets in more and more of interest of people to influence it. So, and we do have a constitution that allows people to petition our government. We want to be careful about when people say, let's silence voices, even if they're corporate voices we don't like, right? There's all these tensions to the system. But again, I take inspiration in guys like Andrew Breitbart, but also in Donald Trump in office. And I think I follow in this model, and Phyllis taught me this, is I don't have any interest in any of these things. I'm interested in the Constitution. You got to get more people that buy into that President Trump will listen to corporations, right? He cares about business. Yesterday, he said something like, if you'll bring $1 billion business to America, I'll cut the regulations so you can make it work. He's a deal maker. He has that instinct. On the other hand, he wants it to be for the good of America. And so we're going to balance that. I can't tell you the specific issue, but there's a major industry that we all hate. And I work with them on one narrow issue because they're exactly right. And we hate them on everything else, but they're right on this issue. And, you have to be willing to figure out how to navigate that. And you have to be willing to fight for the whole truth, but understand what the dynamic is. And the last thing I'd say is, again, back to the vision, more and more of us just need to celebrate and then live out and legislate out and govern out the sort of truth of America, which is America first isn't about better and better ways. If we do that, the world follows and succeeds too. So that's the model. And I think, but it's a challenge. I'm not lying to you. They already, I've heard from people I never heard from in 10 years who I know have an interest in some aspect of government the last 24 hours. And you got to be aware of that. And you got to put that in play in your head. But I don't know. I'm confident right now. I'm energized and we're going to have some failures, but I think in general, we're going to go the right way.